The IMF secretly creates a new money layer, and why you need to be leaving the banks right now. Now, over the last 12 months, the central banks around the world have been creating more of their own fiat currencies, more than any time in history. The US Federal Reserve has increased the amount of US dollars by over 35% in just the last year, while other central banks around the world have added over $8 trillion to their own balance sheets. But there is a secret new money layer that's being created that most people are not even seeing. And it has massive and profound effects on your money, your savings, your money's purchasing power, and the future of the US dollar's role as the reserve currency of the world. So in this video, I'm gonna break down what this new secret money layer is, how it's being used, what the real plans are for it, what this means to the world and specifically to the US dollar, and of course, what this means for our money and what we should be doing to protect ourselves against this right now. So let's go. All right, now before we dig in, if you're new to the channel, my name is Mark Moss, and I make these videos because I want to change the way you think about money, because almost everything that you've learned is wrong. And if you can learn to see it, if you can learn to think about this differently, then you can have more freedom, more options for your life, for your family, and for your future. So if you like these topics and want to help me get them out to more people, to spread the word, help me with the algorithm, take 1 second to click on that like button right now, and then subscribe to the bell, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification if you're not already subscribed. Okay, so today we are talking about something that the IMF is doing. Of course, I've been talking about these three-letter agencies, these three-letter non-government organizations. Of course, the WEF, the World Economic Forum. Of course, the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, the World Meteorological Association. I introduced that one to you recently. If you missed that video, I'm gonna have my editor put it right up here. You can go watch that. And then of course, it's all being put together by our good friends at the United Nations. But today we are talking about this three-letter agency, the IMF. And let's go ahead and dig in and talk about this new secret money layer. Now, some of you may have heard, some of you maybe don't know about SDRs, what these are. The special drawing rights. Now, you don't know a lot about this. You probably haven't heard a lot about this because, of course, it's not covered in the mainstream media. Of course, they're not talking about this. It's a secret money layer. I've done a couple of videos talking about this, and you've asked me if I would do a deeper dive. All right, so I covered it. I'm going to go have my editor throw that video up here where we've covered it, but we kind of covered it from a more historical perspective. And now we're going to dig a little bit deeper into what's really going on because it's happening right now and it's happening really, really fast. And basically, it's leading us to a brand new US dollar crisis. This is going to change the entire system. So when you start taking in, the great reset of the financial system, you start looking at the central bank digital currencies, and then you add in what's going on with this secret money layer that the SDRs are putting together, it's all going to come together. And what I've been saying is it's really like the SDRs are having a renaissance. They're bringing them back. But what does that even mean, bringing them back? Well, you have to understand where they came from. So, of course, if you watch my channel at all, you know that I am a big fan of history because I believe that when we have that historical perspective, it helps to understand not only the present, but understand where we're going in the future. So let's go ahead and jump back in the time machine, and we're going to go back to the history of the IMF and the SDR. We're not going to go too far back. I'm going to glaze over this because, as I said in that other video, I covered really the historical perspective of it. But the IMF was created back in 1944 under the Bretton Woods Agreement. Now remember that word though, the Bretton Woods Agreement. Of course, I talk about that all the time. So really quickly, Britain, the pound sterling was the reserve currency of the world. The United States dollar started to overtake it through World War I, World War II, and basically in 1944, most of the world leaders got together, they met, and they formed what's known as the Bretton Woods Agreement. Now, what's important to understand about the Bretton Woods Agreement is it basically organized the entire world's currency into a single world currency. At that time, the dollar was decided to be backed by gold, and all the other currencies of the world would be pegged to the dollar. So this many euros would equal, there wasn't euros back then, sorry, but this many pounds would equal, would match the dollar and equal an ounce of gold. This many rubles, whatever currency it may be. So that happened in 1944 under the Bretton Woods Agreement. Remember that word now. Now then, at that time, SDRs, they were created in 1969 to replace gold. Now, what does that mean to replace gold? So In the 44 agreement, the dollar would be backed by gold, all the currencies would be pegged to the dollar, thereby all the currencies of the world were also pegged to gold, right? So gold was money for 5,000 years, then the dollar represented gold, which was still money, and in 1969, the IMF realized what the United States was doing. The United States was printing way more dollars than they had reserves in gold, which is what led to them confiscating gold in 1933 under Executive Order 6102. I just did a video about that. It wasn't that they wanted to stop out any kind of competing money supplies. It was that they had printed way too many dollars. The creditors were demanding the gold, and they didn't have enough gold to pay for it, so they had to confiscate the gold to pay for it. That was in 33. But then they confiscated the gold, and guess what they did? They did it all over again. The United States government printed even more dollars. And all the countries of the world were saying, hey, we don't want these fake fiat currency dollars. We want the gold. So they were coming back and get the gold. And the IMF knew that this was a problem. The whole world knew this was a problem. And so they created this SDR to replace it. The dollar, like I said, promised to convert to gold. So any country could come, deliver their dollars, and expect to receive gold back. But it was getting almost impossible to do this. The United States government was basically dumping all their gold to pretend like that gold convertibility was still there. And then finally, in the 70s, under Richard Nixon, it's really the day the dollar died. At that point, that was the Great Reset. The dollar died. President Richard Nixon defaulted. The U.S. went bankrupt, defaulted on their debts and obligations. All right, so that is the high-level overview of that. But it's important to understand now what has been the historical role of these SDRs. And maybe it might even help if I drew this. So you have, let's say that you have each country here. So, you have each country here, and then each country then has their own central bank. So here's Japan, here's USA, here's whatever country. So each country has their own central bank, which controls their currency, right? And under the IMF, you have the IMF, which is the International Monetary Fund, and it's kind of like the central bank above all central banks. Now I understand you have the BIS, and the BIS might take that role, but for this purpose, this is the IMF. So the IMF, so each central bank has their own currency that they can use in their own country. The IMF created their own currency. That is the SDR. All right, so the historical role, in 1970 when that first came out, they had a little bit, about 9.3 billion of SDRs. In 1971, they added a little bit more. They got to about 12 billion. In 2009 was really the first time we really saw it be used. Of course, that was the great financial crash. The entire financial system of the entire world was crashing at the same time. Of course, the IMF had to step in and do something, and so they printed about 21 billion. It pushed the balance sheet up to about $161 billion of SDRs. I'm going to explain what they are, what's backing them, and how they're really being used. But first, let's build this foundation. All right. So over this time period, since 1970 until today, we've had about $161 billion of SDRs that have been created. And like I said, we are having an SDR Renaissance. What do I mean by Renaissance? A revitalization. We're seeing it come back bigger and bolder than ever before. And so let's break that down. So of course, what has triggered this? Well, it's the same catalyst that's triggered everything, which is of course the pandemic. The pandemic has got everything going. Our leaders of these three-letter organizations tell us that we have to take this opportunity to reimagine everything. And so it's been a catalyst for everything, right? It's been a catalyst for technology, from working remotely, you name it, right? But more importantly, in an October 15th speech, the head of the IMF, Kristalina, she gave a speech and said that countries need our support because the WHO got the entire world to lock down in unison. It crushed their economies. And those poor economies, they have no money. And so because we've forced them to shut their countries down, and because now they have no economy, they need our support. And so what we're going to do is we're going to step in and we're going to give them all money. All right, we're going to talk about that. But what she really called, and this is why it's important to understand, what she really called was the IMF is calling for a Bretton Woods 2 moment. Now, I had to tell you what Bretton Woods 1 was because now that you understand what Bretton Woods 1 was, you understand what we mean by Bretton Woods 2. Bretton Woods 1 was get the whole world together to agree on a one world currency. So what do you think a Bretton Woods 2 moment is? about the same thing, right? So she called for countries that were crushed by the pandemic. The IMF would give them loans. And of course, these poor countries, how could they ever afford to pay them back? So they have this special loan forgiveness program. Now, what she said, not unlike our leaders, our favorite leader, Klaus Schwab from the IMF, said that we must seize this new Bretton Woods moment. We must seize it. Of course, it's in unison with our other buddy over here from the three-word organization that we love, the WEF, and he says that this pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world. So you can see how this is all coming together. And this is a quote from her speech right here. She says that we face a new Bretton Woods moment, a new one, getting the world together, a crisis that gets the world together to go back on a single currency, a pandemic, right? She says that it's going to strip an estimated $11 trillion of output by next year. Because why? Because the WHO got everyone to shut down. It's going to strip that much of output. And so what are we going to do? We're going to step in. We're going to seize this moment. All right, let's keep going. And we want to seize the moment, as she said. And when? When do we want to do that? Well, of course, the time is now. No time like the present. That's what my mom used to tell me. So the time is now. So we have good old Janet Yellen here. She is formerly the head of the Federal Reserve. Now she's the head of the U.S. Treasury. And she has decided that she wants to back a new allocation of IMF currency. What's the IMF currency? The SDR, the special drawing rights. And she says that we need a $650 billion allocation to that and allow the IMF to have up to $1 trillion that they can spread out. Now, we start getting numb to these big numbers. $1 trillion, $20 trillion, we don't even know what that means. But to put that into perspective, I always like to bring this back. In 2008, to save the entire global financial system, the U.S. had developed the banks for $700 billion. Today, we'll just throw around $1 trillion like it's no big deal. Now, what's important to understand is that, like I said, she used to be at the Fed, now she's at the Treasury. We've done a couple videos talking about why that intersection is important for her. But what's important is that she knows how to navigate these offices. And what she knows is that the Treasury, her role, can take this action without any congressional approval. So this means that she can unilaterally decide by herself to go ahead and take this action through the Treasury without having to get Congress to go on that. And then what that does is that means the United States okays it. The United States has the majority of that SDR basket. We're going to break that down for you in a minute. So they have the most say in this, and the Treasury can basically say that's okay. Then the countries that get the SDRs, so then these SDR, this new fiat currency, this new money layer, goes out to these countries, and what do they do with it? Now they have an SDR. Well, they're allowed to swap it for United States dollars. So the U.S. gives them money. I'm going to draw this out for you. Gives it to the IMF. The IMF gives an SDR to a country. The country brings it back to the U.S. and we give them dollars. All right. Now, what this does is it requires the U.S. to have even more debt because, of course, we don't have enough. The problem is that a good majority of the money goes to Russia and China. So let's break this down a little bit. So first off, we can see here that the IMF says that it can mobilize up to $1 trillion loans. Of course, why wouldn't it? That's just a drop in the bucket. But it's not as all as it seems. So we have John Kennedy, U.S. Senator for Louisiana, him and Senator Toomey, their colleagues, and they have been pressing the Treasury about this. They say this is not okay. You can see this is just dated from a few days ago. And you can see that they say that the IMF plan to allocate new special drawing rights, this new layer of money, the SDRs, without congressional approval. They're calling them out. This is a problem. They're doing this without getting congressional approval. And then it says the SDRs are backed by IMF member countries' fiat currencies. So remember that when I go to the next page. So the IMF SDRs are backed by what? They're backed by member countries' fiat currencies. Okay. He says that it's a wasteful use of taxpayer dollars and would end up benefiting repressive regimes and state sponsors of terrorism. So by the IMF giving out SDRs as a fiat currency, they're supporting oppressive regimes and state sponsors of terrorism. What does he mean by that? Well, he says that over 2/3 of any allocation would go to the G20 countries which do not need any assistance, and less than 10% would reach the poor countries. So of course, per the Bretton Woods II call out from Kristalina, what did she say? Well, these countries have been hurt by shutting them down, and so they're the ones that need support. But what he's saying is that less than 10% of the money is going to go help the poor countries, which are the ones that need it. So where's it going to go? Well, there's no rational economic justification for such a poorly targeted distribution of aids. He says that directly benefit repressive regimes around the world, including U.S. adversaries of U.S. state-sponsored terrorism. He says billions of dollars worth of SDRs would go to China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and Syria. So that's where it's going. So per Janet Yellen, using the Treasury without congressional approval, giving money to the IMF for their own fiat currency, their own SDR, their new money layer, is going to put the money out, and per Senator Toomey and Kennedy, it doesn't go to the countries that need it. Instead, it goes to support China, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, and Syria. Not the best program. Now, this has been a political debate. So while you haven't maybe heard about this because the mainstream media is not talking about it, this is nothing new. And so we've been debating it. Like I said, it's been a political debate. Obviously, we just got the new Biden-Harris administration. It should just be the Biden administration. I'm not sure why it's the Biden-Harris administration. But the Trump administration, which was before that, put a stop to this. All right, this was not this is not anything new. This is something they've been trying to do for a long time. The Trump administration put a stop to it. Part of the reason why is because he was very tough on China. Right, his policy was make America great again, make America great, put America first, and so he recognized this problem. The administration did. But the new administration seems to be a little bit softer on China, and they actually want the SDR. Now, why do I say that? Do I just back it up? Or do I have anything to back it up? And yes, I do. So Yellen actually went and asked for this. So we can see this right here. Again, Yellen being on the Biden administration. This was Trump basically putting into it. So the bailout was coming until America put a stop to it, right? So why did the Trump administration refuse to play along? He knew what was going on and he didn't want it. We can see here in this article right here that it was surprising. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, so he was head of the Treasury before Janet Yellen. He didn't simply reject the plan. It wasn't like they're like, we're just going to reject the plan. We don't like it. No. They didn't simply reject the plan. The SDR expansion as ill-targeted because SDRs are issued on a symmetrical basis in proportion to existing shareholders. So again, what Kennedy and Toomey said, 70% would go to G20 members, most of which did not need them. Only 3% would go to those most in need. So the reason why they reject it is the same reason why the senators are trying to reject it again. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. Things like this always have unintended consequences. Now we can see here, to back it up, so Yellen asked about the possible $650 billion SDR allocation. She said that it would help some of the neediest countries. So, as I said, the Trump administration shot it down because it wasn't going to do anything to help. Yellen went and asked for it. And so, now real quickly, just to help you understand this a little bit better, because we're going to dig in, but I want to set the stage with a little bit of history. So, of course, money used to be backed by something. So, gold was basically money for 5,000 years, gold and silver, precious metals. So, of course, we have the Roman denarius. It was a silver coin. Now, over 200 years, they devalued it, they debased it. All currencies have been devalued and debased because of human nature. They're always going to want to spend more. So, the famous story with the denarius is that, in order for the Roman Empire to continue to grow, they had to clip the coin. So they needed more money. So they said, we're going to take our 100% silver coin and we're going to make it a 90% silver coin. That extra 10% allowed them to inflate the currency and by devaluing the coin. Then they needed more money. So then it went to 80% silver. More money, but it was worth less. 70%. Over 200 years, they got rid of all the silver. We saw the florin, which was one of the longest standing coins that held its value without being debased from Florence. Lasted 300-400 years. Of course, we had the pound sterling from Britain, which was eventually replaced by the dollar, which again, per the Bretton Woods Agreement, was backed by gold. So the same thing that all these currencies have in common is that they were all backed by something. They were all backed by precious metals. So what are SDRs backed by? This is where it starts getting interesting. Well, currencies are backed by nothing. What is the US dollar backed by? It's backed by nothing. By the full faith and credit of the government, I suppose, whatever that means. Some people say it's backed by the military. I'm not sure what that means, because even Zimbabwe and Venezuela have militaries, but still nobody wants to use their currency. So the currencies are backed by nothing. But check this out. The central banks are the ones that issue the currency. So the central banks, what do they hold as reserves? Well, they hold SDRs. Okay, the SDRs from the IMF. Well, what are the SDRs backed by? They're backed by currencies. Do you see this circular rotation? So we have Fiat, that's backed by the central bank that has SDRs, that's backed by the IMF that has Fiat. And it's a circular motion. So what's backed by what? We don't know. There's no backing at all. And the thing that you have to understand about this is, as this goes on, this is secret theft, all right? This is a brand new currency that you don't have any control over in your country. No matter what country you're in, this is all being done at a higher level above your central bank by the IMF. So it's really secret theft. As more dollars are created, each additional dollar out there is worth less and less and less. Similar to the Roman denarius, we talked about how they needed to inflate their money supply, so they got rid of the amount of silver that was in a coin, so they had more money, but that more money bought less and less and less. And so it's really a form of invisible theft. You had $100,000 in your bank account 5 years ago, you still have $100,000 in your bank account today. The difference is that $100,000 buys way less today than it used to. It's invisible theft. You don't recognize it. And really, it's a debasement of your currency, exactly what happened with the Roman denarius. Nobody really noticed it at 10%, but by the time it got to zero, it did. And really, it steals the value of your purchasing power. And this is really the key piece, purchasing power. That's what you have to think about. So here's a perfect illustration of how this happens. So you had $20, $20, $20. So you still have the same $20. The difference is how much stuff that it buys you. So in 1998, 20 bucks could buy you a big basket of goods. 2005, it was about a half a basket of goods. And by 2013, it gave you a couple of items. Today, 2021, you know how far 20 bucks is going to go at the grocery store. Not very far. And that's exactly what we're talking about. So it's secret theft. But the thing is it's a brand new system that allows them to steal even more money from you. As I said, right, each country has their own currency and their own central bank, and at least our government and the central bank can kind of work together. And I'm not going to get into the whole, creature from Jekyll Island and is the Fed private or semi-private. I'm not going to talk about that right now, but we understand that at least from the government and the Fed, there's a little bit of control for each country. But this is a whole new system going a whole new way. It's a world currency that's not owned by a single nation. That means that nobody in that nation has any control over it. And this is the steps that they need to do in order to get this new world currency to take over. All right. So first, they have to create a large SD money market. So what does that mean? They need to increase the amount of SDRs that are out there. So as I showed you a few slides ago, the SDRs really haven't been used since their creation in the 70s. In 2008 was the first time they were used, and it's been pretty small. But right now, so it was about 160 billion. Now we have 650 billion, quite a bit larger. And we need to continue to grow that. All right, so we need to create a large SDR money market, which is underway as we speak. Now, the other thing is that it needs to remain politically neutral. So, of course, as I talked about with the Trump administration in China, and we're always going to have clashes between different politicians in different countries. So the SDR, again, is one level above that, which remains politically neutral. And then what happens is that the currencies can then swap for SDRs. So, okay, here's some of my currency, you give me back some of the SDRs. And then what we'll start to see through this evolutionary process is we could start to see goods priced in SDRs. That will be a big switch. Then we'll see the debt markets in SDRs, and that will eventually be what ends the dollar's reigns. Now, I know a lot of this sounds like big stuff. You have the signs to watch out for, but just know that this is where we are right here. Once this market is established, all this stuff starts coming really, really quick. Now, Smart investors already know this, already recognize this. They say the market is a discounting mechanism. So what does that mean? So that means that I'm trying to buy $100 worth of value in the future for 50 bucks today, or 20 bucks or 80 bucks or whatever it is. It's a discounting mechanism. And so what that means is that every time you get into an investment, you're basically making a bet on the future. I'm betting this asset will be higher or lower in the future. And so the smart investors are paying attention to this, and they're acting and they're moving accordingly to this already. So the smart money is moving to financial assets. Of course, they're getting out of dollars. One of my favorite billionaires I seem to be quoting a lot lately because he's a pretty smart guy. He says that cash is trash. Cash is trash. Get out of cash as fast as you can. People know that you have to move the money, which is why we're seeing today, as the time of this recording, all the stock indexes are at all-time highs. The S&P 500, the NASDAQ, real estate's at all-time high, Bitcoin's at all-time high, because people know they have to get out of financial assets, they have to move their money, and more importantly, they have to get out of the system. All right, now I continue to pound the table on this. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it is happening as we speak. So a lot of people, I'll probably get flooded with comments on this, and they're saying, when? When is this going to happen? When is it going to happen? The answer is, it's happening, like right now. Like we're witnessing this happen. So when the dollar took over the reserve currency status from the sterling pound, it was about a 40-year process. And then eventually there was a hard stop. And we're in that process right now. It's happening right now. The SDRs are being printed. This is all being done right now. And so when do you want to act? Do you want to close the barn door after the cows are gone or before? And the point is you want to get out of the system while you still can. Out of the paper system into hard assets. So what I consider hard assets may be different than what you consider hard assets. What I consider hard assets are things that cannot be manipulated, things that cannot be inflated. Of course, gold has been that system for 5,000 years because it's very hard to inflate the gold supply. However, they've done that with creating fake paper gold. So other forms of hard assets, real estate, obviously, land, beachfront land, scarce assets, always good. Collectibles have been doing really good. Of course, my favorite, the big B. Some people might not think that as a hard asset, but it is because it's capped at 21 million. There's nothing anybody can do to inflate that number. But the point is that this is all happening right now as we speak. The SDRs are being created to have this new layer of fiat money that's outside of any government's control. Now you have the information. What are you going to do about it? Leave me a comment and let me know what you think about the SDRs if I need to keep going. I haven't got into how they're going to become digital SDRs and might become the new form of currency. So everyone's focused on central bank digital currencies, but wait until the SDR is digital. If you want me to do another video on that, leave me a comment and let me know. I can dig into that one for you and show you what I really think is going to happen, how the banking system will be collapsed into a digital SDR. We'll save that for another video. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think. As always, you know I'm working hard out here for you. The least you can do is give me a thumbs up, right? And let me know what you think. Oh, also, I'm taking questions. I'm sure there's lots of questions about this video. Leave me a question. I'm taking those questions. I'm going to answer them on my new channel, Market Disruptors. If I answer your question on the video, I'm going to send you $25 in my favorite hard asset, in Bitcoin, just for submitting a question. The catch is you have to go to the channel, watch that video to see if I answered your question, all right? As always, like I said, give me a thumbs up on this video, leave me a comment, and that's what I got for you today, all right? To your success. I'm out.